Hey, what's ever up, everybody? It is Mike with Midersikes, and this is episode 3 of the podcast. Let me tell you about a rabbit hole that I've been diving down. I've been watching a lot of, they're not documentaries, they're YouTube videos put together regarding, space and the future of humanity and possible ways that people can die on other planets and all sorts of stuff. Very, very interesting topics. Last night I got into an argument with Google, um, the AI on Google, about the definition of science and how it's always a cop out and its relationship with religion. And yeah, before I knew it, it was like 4 in the morning. And you don't get in an argument with Google, it's stuck in its ways. Imagine that. Uh, But the most interesting thing is the fact that we are sentient, to me, is extremely interesting. On how much our brains have developed over the thousands of years to go from animalistic form to what we are today. That's just crazy. And the fact that we can not only theorize ways that the human race is going to end, or ways to prevent said endings, or to at least save some people, or um, means to get off this planet, is just, it's mind boggling how much we can compute with our brains. And that's not even the full processing power that we are capable of producing in the next 50 years. There's a lot of tech prediction videos out there, some of them from legit sources, and some of them from just random people that like to make videos. But what they do is they follow patterns based on our past tech evolution and theorize, things like AI getting a lot more powerful, and eventually the diseases that we worry about today not being an issue, being able to sustain longer life, um, even goes into further and further down the human history, and how we can upload our consciousness or our minds into either some kind of a server or database, or um, some kind of robotic body or something like that. Now, there have been a lot of even scientists, or engineers that have said that the first human that's going to live over 200 years has been born. More than likely not someone my age in my 40s, but possibly someone that has been born within the last few years. The process of aging is broken down into, um, eventually, when cells copy each other, and then they copy, and then you make a copy, you have a copy, you have a copy, you have a copy, you have a copy. Eventually, that starts to mutate, I guess, or dilute itself. Try making a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy on a printer, or a copy machine. It gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But that's essentially what happens. So if we can find a way to tinker with the cells, through either nanotechnology or some kind of a serum or something, that prevents that process from happening, or at least slows it, then that literally can slow down the aging process. Um, They do believe that even within my lifetime, within the next 30 years, hopefully I live that long, that things like Alzheimer's, cancer, um, most of those will be more treatable than they currently are or cured due to the computing power of AI. The human brain and what we would have to do test wise to get things to work, it would take us years and years and years of trial and error, trial and error, and trial and error. Whereas a computer, an AI, a super AI, can do all these calculations in mere seconds. Revolutionize the medical field. But here comes the largest issue. Is it cheaper to cure a disease, or is it, or I'm sorry, do they make more money curing a disease or treating it? I'm not really a conspiracy guy, but I would 100% believe you if you were to come out and say, "Oh, they definitely have a cure for cancer. I've seen it work." But they're not going to release it to the general public because they don't want to cure cancer because the pharmaceutical companies make way too much money treating it. Now, that's pretty crappy to say, and that thought, the fact that that thought even exists in my head, says something about big pharmaceutical. Because if all the diseases are cured, the medicine producing companies have no way to make money. That's like the big train tycoons. Back in the day, trains was where it was at to transport goods. Now, not so much. But I guarantee it, there was a fight um, to ban things like semis and airplanes and that kind of stuff. We may not remember it. It wasn't taught to us in history, but I guarantee it, if you look back, there was some kind of protest against that kind of stuff. Um, However, some of the companies eventually learned that, oh, well, we can just convert to the semis and still make money. All right, so let's say that they don't want to make money and they would actually rather see a healthy human race. Great. So people born from now moving forward have the opportunity to live longer, if not forever in some form or method. I unfortunately believe that with that, there needs to be some kind of a population control, because if everyone's living longer, but our population is still growing, we're going to get extremely crowded. Or we need to go down the other technological route, which they are speaking of also happening in my lifetime within the next 30 years, is colonizing the moon. And the reason we'd colonize the moon first is because it's a lot closer and it only takes about 3 days to get supplies there. Now, are we going to terraform the moon? They might try, but it's not going to be a huge effort to terraform it. And the reason being is, if we're going to spend all that money and effort in terraforming another rock, why wouldn't they just do that here and try to improve Earth's condition? But could they start the terraforming process? Absolutely. And it can take a long time. But that's the game. It's patience. So, sure, a section of a planet could be habitable, maybe some underground caverns, that kind of stuff, within 3 generations. On a cosmic scale, 3 generations is extremely fast. Extremely. Now, another thing that they go into talking about is people that live on the moon, that don't come back to Earth. They're born on the moon, they live on the moon, there's an economy, there's all sorts of stuff up there. Those people would evolve differently than the people that live on Earth because of the lower gravity, the lower atmosphere. It would eventually happen. They said that any people that colonize Mars, first off, your bone density um, would get lower because of the lack of, or I'm sorry, the lower gravity, and your limbs would begin getting longer. Now, this is thousands and thousands of years down the road. We're not going to see any of this. Unless, of course, they manipulate the human genes to make humans more adaptable to the environment. Instead of changing the environment, change the humans. Um, if the humans want to go underwater, make it to where humans can process that water. We don't need protective suits. The pressure doesn't get to us. Basically, aquaticize us. And that's another thing that has actually been discussed is colonizing the ocean floor, because that's a lot of land space that we're not using with everything being overpopulated. The next thing that they were talking about is, obviously planets like Kepler B, which are other Earth or possible Earth-like planets in their Goldilocks zone of their solar systems, their galaxies, their solar systems. And how long it would take the to get to the closest one, even traveling at the speed of light, it would take probably 3 generations. I keep saying 3 generations, but that's what it would take, or it's 3 or 4 generations just to get to the closest one. And what if we get there and it's just a frozen planet? And another thing you got to think about is, what if the newer generations decide they want to change their mind and go back to Earth? Or when they arrive, like you said, they find it's a frozen planet or a gas planet. Excuse me. Or they find that it's already inhabited. You've got to think about all of these possibilities. I have been in a lot of debates when it comes to religion. Before we go any further and you start forming thoughts about me, I do believe in God. However, I do not believe in the way that God is taught about, if that makes any sense. Anything that is tainted by multiple people. Example, King James. Example, the monks that assembled all of the stories to make the Bible. Now, I will say that I completely 100% argue the fact that people say that the Bible was written. There are actually people out there that the Bible was written by God himself and just given it to us. I said, okay. So this is what happened. God made man. Excuse me. God made man, and while he's doing this, he's recording all of this. God made man. He was extremely short-tempered, um, destroyed evil people, punished people. For the most part, the Old Testament God is just crazy and does all these things. And then his son comes to him and says, "Whoa, Dad, people on earth don't like you anymore. you've gotten this bad rep. Let me go down there. I'll smooth things over with them. Um, and then you can take back over, but you've got to be more hands off. Otherwise, they're not going to like you again. That's basically what you're saying. He, she, it did. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, do I believe that there is, by definition, a God, a being that created us, life? Sure. Or at least assisted us in developing. The show Ancient Aliens has a lot of compelling evidence from, well, look at it this way. So the Mayan people, South America, and well, North America, Mexico, that kind of stuff, the Yucatan Peninsula, and the Egyptians, and they both made pyramids. Both of them have images etched into the walls of their pyramids, or tablets or whatever have been discovered where the design shows some kind of a humanoid form with a large upper head, almost alien in look. And for these supposedly, and I'm going to say it just like that because there's nobody left alive now that can tell you that, but these supposedly more primitive people, how could they get those blocks from one place to another? Yes, I've seen the documentary on how they did it with the logs and the rolling and it literally taking, 40 years and stuff. I don't believe that. That's too much waste of manpower. And I know the pharaohs were a little nutty, but the Mayans weren't, and they did that kind of stuff too. I honestly think that either some form of being from the future wanting to possibly prepare man a little early. Now you gotta think of it this way: people that time travel are gonna very seriously take into consideration the butterfly effect, because if you travel back to when the first fish are starting to come up on land and you step on one, you literally could be stopping the evolution of humanity, or you could kill your specific lineage. And at that point, it's a paradox. You killed your own grandpa before he had your dad. Do you just blink out of existence, or does it start a different dimension, an alternate timeline that coexists parallel to it? These are all different things and thoughts that they have considered. Okay, guarantee it. If they're coming back, they're definitely considering these. So, did they pick a certain point in time to take these savage humans and show them technology and teach them astronomy? Because both, the Mayans especially, are the Aztecs. No, those are the Mayans. Oh, it could have been the Aztecs. I don't know, maybe it's both. I don't know. But gosh, now I got myself confused. We're going to look this up. It's the Mayans. So the Mayans were very, 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 very in tune with astronomy. So were the Druidic people in the United Kingdom, Stonehenge. So were the Egyptians, they were very in tune with astronomy as a culture, or at least it seemed that way based on what was left. Is it possible that both of these cultures ended up becoming an extremely intelligent race, but the only things that survive erosion and time and is some of the stone artifacts, because we're nostalgic. I mean, I've got old video games. Is it possible that their decor at that time was their ancient history and they're actually super intelligent? Maybe that's where the Mayans went. Maybe the Mayans went with these future humans. But anyway, so why would future humans go back? I'm going down. I chase a lot of squirrels as I go down the rabbit hole. Why would these future humans, who to us look like aliens, but they are future humans, why would they come back? Why would they assist humanity in becoming intelligent, possibly quicker? Or perhaps they came back to dumb us down. Perhaps they came back to distract us with astronomy, or that's more unlikely than the latter. I think they came back to get us a kickstart in the right direction to teach us astronomy, because I believe they want us to escape some kind of catastrophic event that happens on Earth where not a lot of them make it. And so they've gone back in time, determined a turning point. Let's say it's only 100 years. 100 years is a huge difference in the sense of technology. In 1890, one of the most expensive things you could own was a horse. It was your mode of transportation. It was everybody's mode of transportation. And then then the car was invented, and people like Henry Ford with the assembly line. And by 2019, or not 2019, 1919, you couldn't give a horse away because now everybody had cars. You don't need horses anymore. When I was growing up, cell phones were a thing for rich people, satellite phones. They were a thing for, lawyers, doctors, rich, not just every lawyer, but big wigs, CEOs, that kind of thing. Mostly car phones. I remember my brother's dad, we were driving somewhere. I'm a kid, I wasn't paying attention. Mom's in the front seat. My brother's dad is driving, and I believe my mother was pregnant with my brother. And he had a big satellite phone. It looks like a briefcase with a phone attached to it with a phone cord. And I remember calling my grandma from the back of a car while we were moving and just thinking it was the most amazing thing in the world. Like, I was just awed and wowed by it. Now everybody's got a phone. When we were growing up, our teachers used to tell us you have to show your work because not no one's going to carry around a calculator in your pocket. You're not always going to have a calculator available. They were wrong. everybody has a calculator in their pocket, at least in most parts of the world. I believe that there is some kind of event that they want us to avoid, or possibly in 100 years, the culture of humanity got to a point where it was violent. Perhaps without growth, there isn't failure. And let's face it, our planet, yes, there's great things, or not our planet, our culture, our race. There's a lot of great things, but there's also a lot of sludge. Okay, there's a lot of mildews and crud built up along the cracks and along the edges and underneath the cabinets, Perhaps there was a whole anarchical anarchy that occurs, but when it occurred for their timeline, it was far enough into the future, we discovered some type of an element or something to where the damage was extremely catastrophic. But now they've set our culture ahead 100 years. So now when the anarchy happens, it's not as severe. And I know you might be thinking to yourself, well, if anarchy happens all over the planet right now, it would be really severe. This is true. But it could be the difference between wiping out every human on the planet Earth with a biological weapon or something, some means, or half the population being killed. And I know it sounds horrible either way, but as a race and as a whole, it would be better to have half the population being killed. There is one thing that's guaranteed. If we do not colonize other planets and become an interstellar species, we won't be around in 1 billion years. We won't be around probably in 1,000,000 years. You got to look at it. If Earth has been around for 4.5 billion years, the dinosaurs were the dominant species for about, was it 200? No, it was 65 million years ago that they were. But anyways, it was a few million years. Okay. Humans have been around for maybe 200,000 years. Maybe. And that's stretching it. That's really, really stretching it. 200,000 years. As an example, let's say you are bowling. Okay. And let's say that from the line where you stop to throw your ball to the drop off behind the pins is the whole timeline of Earth, of our planet. The dinosaurs would have ruled from the line where we stop to throw up to just before the dots, the first set of dots. Humanity has only been around, if you were to take a quarter and stand it vertically and put it just on the edge of the line. That's it. And we are a very arrogant species. Very arrogant. Okay. I've said this before in previous episodes. Anytime that you see someone saying, we got to save the planet, Save the planet. Recycle this to save the planet. They should be saying save the human race, not save the planet. The planet itself, we don't have the capability of destroying the planet. Well, what about global warming? Well, Earth has warmed up before. It's a cycle. It's almost like seasons, but it stretches over millions of years rather than every year. So it'll get really, really hot and arid in some places, humid in some places, and very, very hot. Then it'll go to snowball Earth, where most the entire planet is frozen, and then it'll come back. We just happen to be around during a time when the planet is habitable, atmospherically speaking, and temperature speaking. There have been multiple major extinctions. There's the Great Dying in the Cretaceous, where I think it was, no, just before the Cretaceous period, where 85% of the ocean life ceased to exist. Now, one thing that I did learn recently by watching all of these videos and documentaries is when they say that there's an extinction, that doesn't mean that it happened overnight. This extinction event could have taken 1,000 years. But within that 1,000-year period, because remember, 1,000 years is nothing compared to the 4.5 billion years. So 1,000 years is less than a snap of your finger, less time than a snap of your finger. But it's considered 1,000 years because at, year one, the first set of species start dying off. And then by year 1,000, 85% have died off. And they believe it has something to do with the heating of the ocean and the chemical balance of it. And they say that it's going to happen again. And it does it over and over and over again. It's a rotating cycle. Could humanity survive snowball Earth, is what they call it. There's literally geological record from all over the planet that show snowball Earth. The most mild snowball Earth was the Ice Age. Okay. Humanity didn't live during the Ice Age, or if they did, it was near the end of it. And yeah, because what you see in movies, you can't really believe because the time is spread out. Like T-Rex never fought a Stegosaurus. They were separated by millions of years. Anywho, if you really want to get a kicker, find a video. Actually, you know what? I can do it right now. I can do it right now. We are going to listen to what scientists now believe a T-Rex actually sounded like based on vocal readings and the more and more and more we learn about dinosaurs. So, what a T-Rex would actually sound like. And here we go. You've been lied to your entire life.
I'm going to play you the real sound of a T-Rex. But what the movies got wrong is the roar. They made the T-Rex start to have this loud, screaming, roaring sound. This you hear is that mammals roar. Lions, tigers, T-Rex were not mammals. But the closest relative of T-Rex would be crocodiles and birds. And they don't roar. So in order to have an accurate sound of what the T-Rex sounded like, you would have to mix a crocodile sound and a...
Oh my gosh. Okay, so there's what we think it sounded like. That was some creepy stuff. Let's listen to it again. Here it is. Yeah, that's nutty. Okay. And yes, I know the toads are begging for food tonight. It is feeding night and they know it. So they're bouncing against the plastic. It's so funny. I'll feed them and then they won't do it for 3 days and then they'll do it again. They got little personalities for sure. And now I'm going off topic. But anyways, there are so many things that we think we know, but we definitely don't. Because you got to remember, less than 1,000 years ago, and remember, 1,000 years is not that long when you think on a cosmic scale. Less than 1,000 years ago, every human on the planet knew that the earth was flat, and if you sailed off in the ocean, you were going to fall off the edge. Everyone knew that. That's just the way it was. Obviously, that's not the case, and if you're a flat earther, then I'm really sorry. It's called lunar eclipse. If the earth was flat, it would look like a disc going over the moon. Besides much. Okay. The whole point of going down this rabbit hole is because I am super excited. I'm genuinely excited to see the scientific discoveries that come. And like I said, I do believe in God. I may not believe in the teachings because humanity corrupts everything. They always do. And if you don't believe me, just government, okay? All I have to say. People corrupt things. Now, let me tell you, they may not be doing it intentionally. Think of it this way. So if you have a pastor at a church and there's 200 people in the congregation, okay? If this pastor is making up his sermon for the week, he's going to choose one or two passages from the Bible, and that's what he dedicates his entire sermon to, right? But they don't typically tell you, oh, well, John was talking about this, this, and this, and this, and this throughout the whole book, right? Because sure, he could have been making a metaphor or, for example, this, this, and this. Well, your preacher's cutting out all of the context, right? He's not telling you to read the entire book of that. He's only giving you a line. He's just feeding you what he wants to feed you to make his story interesting. And I'm really sorry. I'm not saying that you are doing it on purpose. If you are a pastor, if you're a minister, a preacher, what have you, I know you're not doing it on purpose, and I know that that's the way we all grew up. That's the way every church I've ever gone to is structured. They pick a couple of lines, or at least one, and then they write their whole sermon around it. But you can't take the Bible literally. Just remember, we know for a fact as a human race, okay, we can trace back all of the documentation that the Bible itself is a congregation of short stories that were brought together and assembled. Okay, the Old Testament was assembled by the Jewish people, or written by some of the Jewish people. quite frankly, to scare people straight, because people were horrible back then. Lots of crime and that kind of stuff. And you got to remember, there was no internet, there was nothing like that. So if there's 5 villages, right, or 5 cities, they may think that's the entire world, right? They may think that those 5 villages are the entire world. And if those 5 villages are just full of corrupt people, because and then they don't go anywhere else. Well, now they're saying, okay, well, there's this supreme being look what happened. Look what happened to this town. And they don't know for sure, because, Joe Bob, that's a thief in this town, doesn't know for sure that the other town didn't get firebombed, right? He's got to go by word of mouth. That's the only way news is spread. And a religious figure should be the most trustworthy figure in a village. And if he says that, oh, that other town, they were full of bad people, and all those people were punished, and they're no longer with us, they died in these extreme ways, I mean, you're going to be scared straight. There is no Google. You can't fact check this. Okay. That's just the way that the culture was back then. You had to take their word for it. I mean, think about it when you were growing up. Before we had cell phones, if you needed an answer, and I'm talking when you're little, you needed an answer, who'd you go to? You went to your parents, your grandparents, and whatever they said, you believed them. They were the heroes of your life, your teachers, that kind of stuff. But we all know that our parents are full of crap. They tell us white lies all the time. We all know that teachers don't necessarily, they're just humans. I mean, they're just normal people like the rest of us. Just because they have the word teacher as a title doesn't make them the most intelligent people on the planet. In fact, if you really look at things, a lot of times, especially in college professors are a very good example. Most of the time, college professors are either people who couldn't actually make it in the field, or people who have since retired, and the field has gone through so many changes that what they're teaching you isn't plausible anymore. Sales techniques from 10 years ago don't work now. The brain of the consumer is way different because of technology. You got to think a lot more fast paced. Marketing is a lot more pop-up ads now, not a used car salesman coming over and going, hey, I saw you looking at that car. It doesn't work that way anymore. By the time people come to the car lot, a lot of times they've already done their research. They can Google it. And if you say, oh, well, this car is great, it does this, this, and this, they're going to go, okay, Google, does this car do this, this, and this? And they'll fact check you. You can't BS them anymore. Um, and that's just an example. Probably one of the only things that hasn't changed, and even accounting. Like, if you're going to become an accountant, accountants are going to be a thing of the past. It's a dying breed. We don't need them anymore. We have software to do it for us. There's literally software out there. You pay like $30 for a year, and it keeps track of all your finances. All you got to do is log it. And some of them even integrate with your payment method, so it literally logs it for you. And then it does your taxes for you. You got to do is submit the paperwork. And then there's some that this paperwork, you can submit it right through the program. And there are so many people out there going into debt to learn, or to get a doctorate, or to get but you're learning from people who don't necessarily stay up with the um, current methodology for said practice or business or skill. Colleges were developed back when it was necessary to either learn a trade or perform a specific service, such as lawyer, accountant. Um, what's another good one? Uh, Lawyer, accountant. I mean, mechanic. Um, there's a lot more. But anyways, it was functional for your village, town, or city to develop people, teachers, to develop people with those skill sets. Now there's so many skill sets that are either out of date or are going to not exist soon. Excuse me, or not exist soon. And remember, I'm thinking cosmic time. Soon for us is, it could be a couple generations still. But people are going into huge debts. And I mean huge debts. Basically, it takes your whole life almost to pay off this debt for a little piece of paper that says, look, I spent 4 years researching this business. And that person's going to go, well, great. What did they teach you? This, and this. Oh, yeah, we don't do that anymore. You've got to learn something else. That's why most businesses, they say, at least what, a degree or 2 years experience in the field. Because if you've been in the field of that business for 2 years, you probably know more and are more up to date than someone coming fresh out of college. Now, someone coming fresh out of college still has that learning mindset, so they're easy to teach and they're going to be cheaper. Okay, and they're coming out expecting the business to run a certain way. Now, I can tell you that there are going to be some things that are good to learn in college, like software that goes along with things, Excel, Word, um, advanced versions of these tools. A mechanic, we're always going to need mechanics. We're always going to need engineers. We're always going to need farmers, scientists. I mean, there are things that we're always going to need. We technically are always going to need some form of a teacher, whether that be someone that teaches digitally to 2 million kids all at once. Imagine that. Imagine an entire profession being gone and just handled by one person. Well, how can they do that? They can't speak every language. Yeah, but there's going to be translators that are literally translator programs that are translating it as you're speaking. It's so fast. One person could sit in their living room with a camera on them and teach an entire city's fifth grade. And school may not be something that you go to for 12 years. They may cut it back. I mean, with technology nowadays, with the fact that you have a cell phone in your hand at all times, and kids get cell phones, younger and younger and younger, why do they need to learn basic math? They don't need to. They have it in their hand. Is it possible that at some point the internet and all electronic devices will be just magically knocked out in 1 second? I guess technically that is true, and we don't want to be 100% reliant. But those are the people that should be doing, like, that are going for college or going for degrees. They should be the ones that have to learn all that. Your basic, everyday, blue collar worker, if this is going to be someone that's just going to be a worker and they don't want to go to college, they just want to go into the workforce and be a laborer, because we need it. There's always a need for laborers until robots take over that job too, which it can happen. I mean, we'll need people to fix the robots, but hopefully by then we don't have an economy. And I will get to that in a second. But hopefully by then, we don't have an economy where not everyone's going to be struggling for a job, but everybody has their own task or contribution to society that helps out. Star Trek is a great example. In the future in Star Trek, everyone has a job, they all go to school, but there's no money. If they want to drink, they just go to the bar area and say, "This is what I want," and they just get it. Okay, there's no money. Well, how is this? How does that person open a bar? Well, there's not individual enterprise. It There's not a corporation anymore. Starfleet is probably the only thing that is kind of um, how do you say it, separated. But there's no businesses. There's no reason to have money. Everything is. I mean, if you are a very important person, like your task is your job that you do for the culture is huge, you have access to bigger and better things. But people in that society are also not greedy for the most part. At least that's the way it's structured. I know it doesn't make any sense, but go watch them. It'll make more sense. I've gone off way off track. And I'm just kind of rambling, but it's good to get these thoughts on paper because these are the kind of things I think about. If you come visit me in the shop and I'm checking you out and putting items in your bag and counting your items, I'm also wondering when the first actual sentient AI will drop. And goofy stuff like that. That's why I'm always like energetic and crazy, because I'm constantly thinking about 900 things at once. I hope this is going to be a short episode. I'm going to end it right now because I'm tired, and I believe that I've given you a lot of thought and a lot of ammunition, I should say, to blow the comments off if you want. Like always, if you have a recommendation for another topic, I'm going to constantly say that because eventually it will happen. Go ahead and drop it in the comments. I ask that you just remain nice and open minded. And it is an opinion, and nowhere do I state that I'm 100% correct and factual. These are all opinion. And that's the great thing about science is science goes by the available, observable evidence and nothing more. If new evidence comes to light that says a different thing, then that outcome or that theory changes to adapt to the new evidence. Just like that. All right. Yes, I am going to end it. Thank you all for your time. Love everybody. And all of you have a wonderful day.